How many of you are from Bozeman? No, I mean really from Bozeman, like born in Bozeman. Deaconess, first ski lesson before you could walk at Bridger Bowl, from Bozeman. I only made the mistake of saying I was from Bozeman once. I was working at a restaurant downtown Bozeman, and we were running up and down the stairs cleaning up after a shift, when the waitress I was working with turned to me and said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Bozeman. I've been here about 6 months." And she whipped around on her heel, poked her finger between my eyes, and said, "That's not from Bozeman. I'm from Bozeman, born and raised," and turned on her heel and ran up the stairs. Now, I never made that mistake again. But after living here for 6 years, Bozeman was in my blood, and I wanted it to be in my bones. I had done the Huffing for Stuffing race every year since it started. I had volunteered for Eagle Mount up on Bridger Bowl. I had gone to MSU and got my master's. I loved Bozeman, but I still felt I needed a little more to be a Bozeman girl. So I had to take action. I signed up for the Ridge Run. Shockingly, although I started the race to become more of a Bozeman girl, I finished the race becoming more of who I was. The Ridge taught me so much about myself that I still use today. The trail showed me skills, and it helped me to reflect on who I was, and I use those tools in my life today. Now, I'm a runner, and I don't know if you all are runners, but I run. I run on the track, I run on the trails, and I run in life. That day, and I don't know, if you're not a runner, I hope you understand this, but as a runner, training is by far my least favorite part of running. I like the races. So training is arduous and it's grueling, and by the time I get to the starting line, the race is far over in my head because the training's over. So on the Ridge Run, the day before the race, I was celebrating. I was celebrating the end of my training, and I had a glass of wine, followed by 4 bottles. Before the gun was off, the finish line was in my rearview mirror, and I was on the road. So, needless to say, all of that training was fairly useless in that state. At 4:30 in the morning, my alarm went off. I made my way to the M parking lot to hitchhike up to Ferry Lake. I packed like a sardine in the back of a station wagon, not knowing for sure if I was hungover yet or still a little drunk. I prayed that the alcohol smell wasn't coming out of my pores like the buff guys in hot yoga on Sunday mornings. And I rode up. As I watched the minutes tick off my watch, I knew my chances of bailing were getting smaller and smaller as we rode up the washboard and we landed at Ferry Lake Trailhead. Now we were still packed like sardines, only we were all on a tiny little trailhead, over 300 of us ready to start the race. And I knew I didn't have a ride back, so there was only one way out of this. Bang! Off the gun went, and I started up the switchbacks. Now it's the Ridge Run. It's 20 miles at almost 10,000 feet, up and down and up and down. It's a hard race, and luckily they have entertainment. So the first entertainment you come across is a bagpiper. For me, it's music, which is good. I can't hear the huffing and puffing of the people around me quite so strongly, but it's a bagpiper, so it sounded a lot more like a wake to me than the start of a grand adventure that I had planned. As we made our way up the switchbacks to get up to Sacagawea, it reminded me a lot of elementary. So if you're at all like me, I remember every time that I felt excluded, elementary all the way through. In elementary, I remember the time when I got my first piece of jewelry. Oh, I felt so special. All the way from Saudi Arabia, my aunt and uncle brought me the tiniest little golden heart, solid gold heart in my head at least. And I was so proud to wear it. I wore it every day, and one day the thin chain that it hung on broke, and it was gone. And I remember the girls on the jungle gym who laughed and tried to understand what I was telling them as I bawled about this little heart. And I remember the little boy in class who made fun of me for losing my golden fart. So frustrating. I remember also in 3rd grade getting glasses and being called Four Eyes, even though I advanced to grade level in reading because I could finally see the book. All I remember is the people looking at me funny. And I also remember in 3rd grade as I proudly strode into my first day wearing the outfit my grandma had made, when everyone between 2nd and 3rd grade apparently got cool and wore store-bought clothes, and I was wearing a very snazzy gray button-up little one-piece suit. I did not fit in, and it was made obvious to me by my peers. Like Sacagawea, grade school taught me about life, good and bad. I was shy in grade school. I was like this little speck in an ocean of 7-year-olds all vying for attention. And that self-centered fear that made me shy also made me feel like I was alone, even when I was the center of attention. So I made it to the top of Sacagawea. And although my mind wanted to get up there fast, my body, as you might assume, was fighting me the whole way. And it's important to get to the top of Sacagawea fast because they're timing you and they'll kick you out of the race if you don't make it in a certain amount of time. But it's also important that you don't pass out on the way. So finally, after Sacagawea, you start heading downhill into Ross Pass, which for me is a lot like summer break. Summer break, collecting worms, riding bike, playing in the river. Ross Pass is shaded, and it's a very clear dirt path. It's luxurious in all its glory. It's beautiful and calm and awesome. But it's bookended by Sacagawea, which I had just passed, and the Bridger Ridge, which was right in front of me. Now, the Bridger Ridge for me was like high school. It was very arduous. It's a hard trail. There's huge boulders of confusion where not one track from the other 300 people in front of me is evident on these giant boulders. And my only hope is the guy with licorice behind me coming to shoo me back onto the right trail. Being a teen, as I said, I have a mind like an elephant. I remember the day when the bubbly, blonde, bouncy girl came up to the lunch line where 2 of my friends and I were standing. And she had some evaluations for us. She pointed to one of my friends and said, "Extra large." She pointed to herself and said, "Medium." She pointed to my friend who had the deformity in her chest that caused it to sink in and said, "Small." And she pointed to me and said, "Extra small." And I remember that today. I'm sure no one getting evaluated, except maybe the girl giving the evaluations, were happy about their evaluation. I can reflect on that now. But at that time, it made me feel extra small. And I still remembered it at our 20-year reunion, just not wanting to even see that person because it made me feel so little and so inadequate. I remember in track, I was a really good runner, as I've kind of alluded to. And I was in track and I would win a lot. And I remember, but the most vivid memory I have of track is not crossing the finish line any of those times. It's in the back of the bus when the kid, 2 years older, said, "Have you ever thought about your nose?" And I looked back and said, "Oh, what about my nose?" And he said, "It's big." And I never thought I had a big nose until then. And ever since, it's like the ingrained thing that I know about myself. It's not the track accolades or getting lettering as a 7th grader. It's none of that. It's what that boy said to me and made me feel extra small again. So by the time I got to high school, I had learned to sort these things out. And on the outside, my life didn't look unmanageable or strange. I I had the inside and the outside all figured out. So on the outside, I got good grades. What I kept on the inside is that I threw up after every meal. On the outside, I got into a Big Ten school, and I was on the honor roll. And on the inside, I was self-deprecating and in a lot of pain. And that's a lot like going up the backside of Bridger. I always had parents' arms to fall into as my life would crumble and then the inside parts would peek out. But I had to keep putting one foot in front of the other to get to the top of the Bridger Ridge. Now, Saddle Peak is next. Saddle Peak doesn't look that bad from 10,000 feet. But in fact, you can't get to Saddle Peak unless you hike a whole lot to get there. So by the time you ever get to Saddle Peak, you're tired and you're worn out, and you've had a lot happen to you to wear your body down. And for me, that's a lot like my 20s. My teens were a little rough, especially on the inside. And my 20s, although I thought they should look like a Friends episode and be just a grand adventure, they were a lot harder than that. In fact, when I was 25, I decided I would buy myself a motorcycle. And I took the test. I went to the DMV and I took the written test. And just before I was about to get a bike and start practicing, my life took a change, or it took a turn, and so did my relationship. And I decided to scrap the motorcycle. I'm sure my parents were relieved, because when I was 16 and got my driver's license, I put dents in 3 sides of their car the first year. One time I backed one of my dad's vehicles into the other. And there's nothing like exchanging insurance information with your dad. So at 25, if I wanted to make it to 26, a motorcycle was probably not a good idea, especially in my more mature parents' minds. So unfortunately, the other option that I decided to go with is not on any parent's bucket list for their 25-year-old daughter. I decided to move to Las Vegas. So it didn't even, before I ever got in the car to go to Las Vegas, things started happening. Kind of like the challenges, the rocky challenges of Saddle Peak. The girl I was supposed to move with made some poor decisions and ended up on house arrest. The guys that she set up to ride there with me in her stead, about 3 hours in, turned to me and said, "Man, we should have brought something along to make this more fun, or at least keep us awake." And I was a 25-year-old from a really small town in northern Minnesota, and I didn't know exactly what they meant, but I knew I didn't want any part of that fun. And I also knew I was not going to let them drive, and we were not going to stop for anything but gas the whole way, 24 hours to Las Vegas. So we got to Vegas, and those same guys shockingly didn't have a place to live. I dropped them off, which was not even that big of a deal as it turns out, because I dropped them off at the bus station, and they stole my checkbook and bounced it all the way across back to Minnesota. The guys that the girl on house arrest in Minnesota set me up to live with turned out to be construction workers by day and small-time drug dealers by night. I got a stalker. I got my tire slashed more than once. I couldn't park at my work. I had to park at a hotel and take a valet to work. Needless to say, Vegas did not last very long. 7 months later, I was out, but moving like running was now in my blood. I moved from Vegas to Montana to Florida, back to Minnesota, back to Montana, all within a couple of years. And then, after all that rockiness, climbing up Saddle Peak and making it through my 20s, I got to Baldy, the apex of the race and where my life collided with the trail of Bridger Ridge Run. The life of Jessica Pearson, Clausen, Pearson, Watson, no, just wait. The life of Jessica Marie Pearson, Clausen, Pearson, Bucklehide, Watson, Dane collided on Baldy. At 8,914 feet, I hit my bottom. As I hyperventilated, and the race volunteer rubbed my back and told me it was okay, I let go. I decided that my ideas weren't working anymore in my life or on the race. And I decided, when she slapped me on the back and told me it was all okay, that I was going to be fine, to believe her. Now, coming off of Baldy was a lot like skating or sliding into a chairlift line after a hard run down the hill. I believed what she told me, and I started down the path, just putting one foot in front of the other, and believing in my wholly inadequate self to get down that hill. By the end of the race, my personal fan base was cheering, and I fell into their arms. And if I think in a month later, I gave up again on my bathroom floor, hopeless and wrecked and shaking. And that's not the end of my race, because like you all know, the roads that leave the M parking lot go in every direction, and they crisscross the world. And I live my life today beyond the finish line. I run beyond, because the finish lines in our lives are actually just the beginning of the next race. So I ask you today, what race are you running? Are you at the apex? Are you running the back roads to the things that feed your soul? Are you on a soft, shaded trail, enjoying the view? No matter what race you're running today, enjoy it and savor every moment, because this is what's preparing you for your next adventure.